All right, a happy Sunday morning. Hopefully, everyone is doing great out there. I am doing this video from parts unknown. No, I am not a golfer, so I'm not going out and playing 18 holes today, but just a quick 24-hour getaway, especially when you have two teenagers at home and one from college. So I figured we would let the Knicks loss on Saturday night marinate a little bit here, and we will do their offseason video. They are team 28. We are left with the Indiana Pacers and the Oklahoma City Thunder, just like how everyone planned. I need to look up this stat, and I'm going to get into the next video in a minute. I believe that the Pacers and Thunder total payroll combined, is less than what Phoenix paid this year. I'm sorry for my Suns fans out there because I'm casting on a stray. I guess that's what they say with that. So I'm looking forward to it. I know America loves the LA, the New York, Golden State's got to be a marquee. I think it's two really good teams. I think there's clear separation between Oklahoma City and Indiana, but we didn't come here to do a finals preview. We did a New York Knicks preview. I just teed off. I open up the state of the roster and I said, listen, if and I do think we have this. I always say this, and I'm sorry if I drive people crazy when I say it, but we have this perception that change, like wholesale change, is needed. I think if you go back to last year when Indiana lost to Boston and got swept in the conference finals, people would have probably gone through my comments and said they need to blow it up. Siakam doesn't work. Halliburton, they need to trade Turner. They got to get younger. Carlisle's not the fit. And they basically brought back the same group. And although different than where New York is right now, now they're 4 wins away from the NBA Finals here. So I do think you have to have that perception of like pump the brake. As I said in the Minnesota video, it's not always about firing the coach and trading for Giannis or trading for Kevin Durant. But this offseason is important for New York because you are kind of going down this path where if you go to the right, this is kind of who you're going to be for the next 2 or 3 years, which is totally fine. As far as the coach, man, I never understood why there's such angst amongst Knicks fans as far as trying to get rid of a coach. Is Tibbs perfect? No. But is any coach perfect out there? Definitely not. Not even Phil Jackson was perfect. So he's going to be back unless there's the owner steps in and you've already seen certainly the players, especially Jalen Brunson, kind of give him the vote of confidence here. I think could he have done a better job in the Knicks series? Could he have done a better job playing the bench? Could he have done different? Yeah, we could go through everything. But I think he's the right fit for this group. I think he's going to be back next year. And that's my two. I never write these articles about firing, why somebody should get fired. That is never really the purpose. I say maybe the front office will need to think about it or question, but I'm never going in there saying this coach needs to be fired. If you're looking for that, you can go read somewhere else. There are no participation trophies when you lose in the conference finals. But I do think in whole, when you look at where New York was, reaching at least the second round 3 years in a row, first conference final since '99. As I said, this is something to build on, not tear down. That's the most important thing to think about this. I think what happened is when you beat Boston who was the prohibitive favorite after Cleveland goes out. When you beat Boston in the second round, there's this thinking that we are, basically our path to the NBA Finals is going to be clear. It wasn't. During the regular season, you had 1 game separation between yourself and Indiana. The Pacers were red hot down the stretch. And then at the end of the day, they were the better team. Sometimes reality kicks in that they are the better team. All right, let's look at the season. Let's look at the offseason. So you've got one pick, you've got a second round pick, the 50th pick in the draft. I would say likely that's probably going to be tagged either if you trade out, that's probably going to be tagged as a two-way player, just because what you have to spend this offseason is probably going to be more important as far as what your roster is. Certainly a player that you draft and you sign to a second round pick exception, you do get them at a lower cost. So that is certainly, that's the one thing. Here are your free agents. Precious, it's basically your bench. Precious Achua, Campaign, DeLon Wright, Landry Shamet, Ariel Huck Party has got a team option, PJ Tucker, and then your two-way players are all on your two-way players are all free agents here. So you're basically going to wipe the slate clean as far as from a two-way perspective here. There is an interesting quote in the state of the roster that, and if you haven't watched it, and I'm sure Knicks fans have, it's the James Dolan interview with the Roommates podcast. That's Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson's podcast, where he basically says, like, man, like we changed over the roster last year. We traded for Mikal Bridges. And then we traded for Karl Anthony Towns. Like sometimes you need to like let this thing marinate a little bit here and let it develop. Like there's no perfect wand out there that can just put, basically wand itself over the team and say like, this is a championship team. This is a good team, but there is some work to do. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. I'm just looking at my phone because I don't have my second screen up there as far as what to, over here. The strength of this roster, I think, continuity is the strength of this roster, right? But it's not perfect, right? Loss to Indiana proved the bench has got to get better or more used. I think there's a one thing that says is what you had was good enough, maybe, but you have to figure out what the role is for your depth. This is an interesting stat. I said, for better or worse, the Knicks starters averaged 94 points per game in the regular season, the second most since 86-87. The only team they trailed in the starters' points per game this season was the Denver Nuggets. And we saw after the Denver series, Jokic, depth. All right, this is where you are financially going in there. And there is a little bit of wiggle room. You're at $200 million. Remember, the apron rules reset starting on July 1st. So you are at $200 million in salary. They are $3 million over the first apron. So if the season ended and we went into July 1 and that's who you are, remember, you cannot use more than 100% of your traded player exception. If you're it's always important, post-transactional salaries exceed the first apron. So that means taking back more money other than a veteran minimum contract in a trade. Okay, so that's where you are, 3.8. You are $8 million below the second apron. Remember, the apron hasn't triggered, right? So if you wanted to go out and sign all your free agents and bring them back and exceed the second apron, you can do that. Is that going to happen? I would say highly unlikely as far as how that happens. You are probably going to get some flexibility. I do see them not exercising the PJ Tucker team option, which is at 3.5 million, because even if you wanted to bring PJ back, you can bring him back at a $2.2 million salary. That would save you at least 1.3 million. So I would expect, unless we're going to be ultra aggressive, and we can talk about that in a minute, you're basically looking at your $5.7 million tax mid-level exception to use on one or two players, and basically filling out your bench with minimum contracts, unless you're going to make a trade to shed some more money. But you are going to have to be extremely creative as far as how you are going to fill out your bench. Remember, if you use the 5-7 tax mid-level exception, that will trigger the second apron. Okay, so you've got to keep that in mind there. Just by using that doesn't make you exempt as far as how the second apron rules are. Remember, if you exceed the second apron, as I said, if you wanted to just go out and re-sign all your free agents and you want to go over the second apron, which I don't think is going to happen, then you are not allowed to aggregate combined salaries if it leaves you over the second apron. Okay, so that's a little bit on finances. You've got a $2 million option on Hakporty too. So those are the two players with options, but you have got a little bit of money, not a ton of where you are. As I said, the priority this offseason is going to be depth. Your two picks last year, Kolek and Dadier, paid a combined 400 minutes this season. You are going to need to make that either they can play or they can't play. I mean, that's the reality of it here. You're not going to force guys that can't play. But when you draft in the first and you get an early second, there's a priority for those two players to be part of the rotation next year. 93% of your payroll is tied up within your starting 5 and 6-man Mitchell Robinson. Okay, so you've got to be resourceful in free agency. You're going to have to sell free agents to take less money with the goal of competing for a championship, and potentially less playing time. The Knicks reserves this season ranked last in minutes per game. So if you're going to sell a guy on coming to play, they've got to be mindful that it might be not the minutes they're expecting here. As I said, the trade market is less advantageous unless New York wants to move one of its starters or Robinson. The Robinson situation is going to be interesting because he was really good for you during the playoffs. And when he was healthy, he's got an expiring $13 million contract. It's kind of going back to the trade deadline. Is he more valuable on the court or in a trade? That's what you have to weigh here. And remember, you have one tradable first round pick in the next 7 years, 2026, top 8 protected first from the Wizards. Okay, so that's kind of the state of your priorities, is basically kind of bargain shopping for your bench unless you're going to make a swing for a trade, unless it involves Robinson or maybe Josh Hart. We'll certainly keep an eye on where New York goes here. All right, here are your extension candidates to watch. The Brunson extension last year has given you a financial pathway. So if you go out and sign Mikal Bridges this offseason, he's eligible for 156. That puts you in a position where you're still going to be significantly under the second apron in 2026-27. That's the first year when Bridges extension kicks in. You're roughly $30 million below the second apron. So it's not like if you extend them, now you're stuck where this roster is. I think that because remember, Robinson's coming off the books. Some other salaries are coming off the books. The cap's going to go up again. So keep an eye on that. I think you have to weigh that. If you are comfortable extending Mikal Bridges at that number, then go out and do that. But you do have to have that mindset, is that once you extend him, A, he can't be traded for 6 months. And B, this is kind of who you are with Towns, Brunson, OG, and Bridges all making 30 million plus in 26-27. There were some good positives from Mikal Bridges this year. Certainly, I think it's a different role for him, certainly, than what we saw in Brooklyn the last 2.5 years. And it's similar to kind of the role we saw in Phoenix. His efficiency went up, his points per game went down, ranked number 2 on field goal percentage at the rim. Certainly from a defensive standpoint, you would maybe like to see a little bit different, made those huge plays in that Boston series. But he is the extension candidate to watch. If he's not extended, then that is certainly going to be the trade candidate that we're going to circle here. And he's on an expiring contract. Towns is also extension eligible. He can extend he's got 3 years left, 53, 57, 61. That last year is a player option. You can either extend him for 3, where that player option is removed with another year. It's basically a comparable salary, or you can go 2 for 150. I am not, and I like Karl-Anthony Towns. I'm not extending him for 2 for 150. It's $75 million per year when he's in his mid-30s. I'm not doing that. Team needs 3-and-D, wings off the bench, perimeter shooting, front court depth. As we talked about, the draft equity that really isn't there. That certainly that trade with Brooklyn has diminished a lot. Got one tradable first in the next 7 years. You're allowed to swap first in 26, 30, and 32, and you have 7 seconds available. Remember, if you go out and buy a pick at the draft, your second apron gets triggered for next year. So be mindful of that. So that is it in a nutshell here. I know everyone is going to want to talk about Giannis and KD. Do we have enough to go out and do that? I think you have to be careful when we're already talking about a team that's lacking depth. You're basically you would have to trade a combination. I don't see a team like Phoenix or Milwaukee wanting Karl-Anthony Towns. That doesn't fit as far as what they're wanting to do. Then you're looking at, it would be Anunoby and Bridges, or Bridges and Hart isn't even enough to do something like that. So you got to be extremely, extremely careful when you're weighing another blockbuster trade, just because of what you have from a draft equity standpoint. One tradable first, any of these trades, and I'm working on this mini trade guide, and I think it will give you an idea. Any of these trades that maybe could come to fruition, man, it is going to be extremely, extremely complicated, where we're getting 3 or 4 teams involved. People are talking about Minnesota, certainly with Durant. All this is going to be complicated. I never say it's not doable, but I just always say it's going to be extremely complicated. So that is it. Enjoy your Sunday. We've got no basketball till Thursday. Enjoy your weekend.
around and try to boast at what I look like. Think I'm gonna try to wear, I pull up long range. Jimmy with the heat, I'm on fire. It's 88 over here, 2 o'clock.